Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for your daily dose of the roars as we scream about the very stupid stuff going on in the world of technology because my poor little brain can't handle the very stupid stuff going on in the wider world. And wow, echo, 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 echo. Can you hear the echo? Wow, the audio profile of this room has really changed since I removed the shelf. So I had my shelf units here, my china cabinet. All the Chinese people were really impressed with my china cabinet for some reason. It's not a china cabinet, it's IKEA shelves. But anyways, I had the shelves here. And so when we moved in back in September. I put the shelves here, didn't think much about it, started doing videos. And I have to say, the acoustics of the room was pretty good. It was pretty good. And then I was like, you know what? I want to really make my lab room. I have a lab environment over there. I really want to make my lab environment more functional. I need shelves in a lab environment more than I need in my office space. So I'll move my shelves over there and then just kind of have like the art and stuff in my office. And really didn't think much about it, to be honest with you. It wasn't really like that big a deal. And then you realize, echo. It's like, wow, that really changed the acoustics. So apparently, if you're trying to make the acoustics of your room better for podcasting or vlogging or whatever, IKEA shelves. Apparently, IKEA shelving is the answer. And that's not even a joke. It's not even a joke. It's like, wow, maybe I need some more IKEA shelves. It's weird. It's like, it's a big difference. I don't know if you can tell. That's a big difference. How do you like my picture? These are the pictures from the the second iteration of Silicon Dojo. I had a classroom at this place called The Hatch. I got these nice pictures to make my classroom prettier. And now they're here because I like them. I think it's called bigcanvas.com or greatbigcanvas.com. Absolutely fabulous. These are, they're canvas. But you can get like any size you want. So I got like this particular picture. I got that picture over there. And I got some other ones. And there's this one artist. And basically, for some reason, he just started doing pictures with like retro robots and donuts. He was just like, you know what makes me passionate? Retro robots and donuts. And so like every one of his pictures, I'm not even joking. See, like, so we got the robots on Safari here with a donut. We have like the King Kong robot with a donut. Again, if we come over here where the acoustics are better. Wow, the acoustics are so much better in here. Oh, well. Anyways, we got the snake over here. So we got the robot fighting the snake with the donut. And we got up here, we got the robots and trains with donuts. No donuts on this one. This was disappointing. I expected a donut. Didn't get any donuts out of that one. But anyways, it's like the weird thing with artists. It's a weird thing with artists. You're like, why? Why do you do robots with donuts? What is the answer? I still remember that. I went to a very nice art gallery once. There was an art gallery actually here in Asheville. And we were looking at this piece. We were looking at this art piece. And it was like biblical. It was like Jesus biblical settings, right? But everybody was basically dressed in like Star Trek The Next Generation uniforms. It's like very weird. Like imagine like all those Bible stories. Now imagine if everybody looked like Picard. I'm like, well, that's interesting. It was technically very nice. Technically high quality art. I'm not sure. I just don't want the crucifixion of Picard in my office. Anyways, it was interesting though. So I went to the gallery person, as I do, to ask questions, and I'm like, so what's the meaning of this? Like, what's the, where was the artist going with this? And she just looked at me, and was like, well, where do you think he was going with it? I'm like, no, seriously, it's. It's like Jesus scenes for Star Trek The Next Generation. Like, where does that come from, right? Like, I have the angry wobot out there. So my lab. Oh, one of the pictures on the plywood. That's an angry wobot. And basically, where that came from is there was this artist And I think he got into like a really bad car accident. He just got into a really bad car accident, had his life flash before his eyes, the whole 9 yards. And after that, all he wanted to do was paint pissed off pandas. And you're like, what? He's like, yeah, I don't know. It really just, there was something about that car accident. He really wanted to make angry fucking pandas. Like graffiti angry pandas. I was like, oh, okay, well, fair enough. And so now apparently he has a whole line of angry wobots is what they're called. Anyways, there you go. There's some art, some things to be thinking about. But yeah, for the people out there that laugh that I collect art, I really do. This is just my office. This is just my crappy office. We have the Venetian painting. I got that in Venice. I really like that. I was talking to the Venetian painter who did that, and he really hated tourists and like Chinese manufacturers. That's its own deal. It was interesting. Again, you want to talk about weird bottlenecks, bureaucratic bottlenecks. So I bought this. So this was a brand new painting when I bought it 6-7 years ago. Anyways, he had done it that year, whatever. So I bought it from him. The interesting thing, from a bureaucratic standpoint, he actually had to fill out a form, and the Italian government had to authorize him to be able to send this to me in the United States. So I bought this, and I bought a really nice, real Venetian mask. And basically I bought it, I handed him cash, and then he starts filling out all these fucking forms. Like these forms. Like, what the fuck? I'm just buying a painting and a mask. Why are you filling out forms? And it's like, oh, because of like the Italian heritage laws or some such crap. Anytime you ship any kind of art, apparently outside of Italy, it has to go through this whole bureaucratic process. Winning. Hey, you know when you have tourists willing to come to your city and go to your artist and pay a lot of money for things like art, you know what you should do? You should add a massive bureaucratic hurdle. That's true. Anyways, I always think of that as my little Peanut. Remember Peanut? Peanut died a couple years ago. Very sad. I love that little dog. Anyways, whenever I look at my chicken, I think of Peanut. So, because that's how she would look. She would have like this blissed out look. Oh my gosh, she would try to eat everybody else's face, but when she looked at me, she would just have like this blissed out look. And I always think of that as my Peanut chicken. And then we have this. This is my big old piece of art. I love this. This is my Geese. Bottinelli is the artist. Anyways, also from Asheville. But my wife got this years ago for our 10th wedding anniversary. We've been together almost 20 years now. Anyways, for my 10th wedding anniversary, she got this thing shipped up to Baltimore from Asheville because we didn't live there here at the time. She got it framed up and the whole 9 yards. And it was kind of one of those things. Like, I had been looking at this painting for years every time I came to Asheville. But you know how like you see something, but you don't see it. So she got it, and she was like, we had the F-150 or the truck at the time. She's like, yeah, I need your help to get your present out of the truck. I was like, what the hell could this possibly be? And then I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And holy shit, it's a lot bigger than I thought it was. It's one of the problems we have. Every time we buy a house now, we have to find like a wall that fits that painting. It used to be in our dining room, and then it was in our living room. The reason it's now down here in my office right now is simply because we don't really have enough walls to fit it. Like, I prefer it up in the living room, like the living room or the dining room, and like the walls are too small. My walls are too small to handle my art, motherfucker. Anyways, I don't know. Random stories about the real world. It's funny, the people who just click on these videos simply for the title. And then they're like, what the hell is this? I don't know. What is it to you? What does it mean to you? That's the question. I am simply providing robots and donuts and Picard being crucified. What is the meaning of it? I don't know. Anyways, do remember I do these videos in order to support Silicon Dojo, free hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. We have a class coming up on AI agents for telephony with Twilio and 11 Labs next Wednesday. We have another class coming up, a full-day class on Bottle Web App Framework and SQL. That'll be coming up in a couple weeks. And we have another class coming up on TCP/IP version 4 for programmers, so programmers know what the hell a default gateway is. So those classes are coming up. If you are able to physically join, because they're in-person classes, take a look at silicondojo.com. And if you want to support free user education, there's a donor box link down below. Also, just so you know, I have been confirmed as a speaker for the All Things AI conference in Durham, March 23rd and March 24th. So that's there. I don't shill for conferences. I've been to a lot of conferences, and whenever I go to a conference, they really want me to shill for it. And the problem is, I've been to so many shitty conferences. So many shitty conferences. So I don't shill for conferences. To be clear, I don't shill for conferences. But I will say, I know a lot of the people involved with the All Things AI conference. They're supposed to get like 2,500 people there. So it might be worthwhile. It might be worth $200 or $300 to go. I don't know. That's my ringing endorsement. It'll exist. The All Things AI conference exists. Anywho, with that, we're 11 minutes in. We're 11 minutes in. I guess we gotta get to the clickbait. But do we? Maybe we can just sit here and bullshit about other stuff for a while. I do feel bad. I feel bad. Like, I don't know what it is. Like YouTube. And YouTube hasn't changed recently. To be clear, YouTube hasn't changed recently. But I've been in YouTube since 2009. And it has been disheartening how YouTube really did go from a place of unique voices and unique viewpoints and unique ways of doing things to this cookie cutter horse shit where everybody does the exact same crap. It is really weird. Like there is this idea that YouTube was going to destroy television, and it really just kind of feel like television co-opted YouTube. Right? Remember when YouTube was unique and interesting and all kinds of different stuff was going on? And now, as I say, it's just become like there's a way to do it. Eli, there's a way to do YouTube and you're doing it wrong. So yeah, it sucks. Anyways, welcome to the modern world. Welcome to the modern world. We thought, again, I do feel like this is a Gen X moment. I think about that with The Matrix. I think about, like, the last Matrix movie, I only got to see about a third of it. I could only stand about a third of it. It came onto Netflix. I could only tolerate it. Like, I just could not get through the damn movie. Anyways, but I really feel like that scene, like, if you really want to know what it feels like to be Gen X, like, actually know what it feels like to be Gen X, there's like this scene with Neo, Keanu Reeves, and he's like up in this beautiful fucking condo. It's like beautiful fucking condo, beautiful fucking view. And he's like downing pills because he's like, what the fuck has happened with my life? And I feel like unintentionally that was the true capstone for the Matrix set of movies, right? In the beginning, you know, Neo, he was just sitting, he was just in his own little dark little room doing his little coding thing, not thinking about anything else. And then he was brought into this world and he was basically told, like, he was basically, you know, cyber Jesus. He could change everything. And there was that, right? There was the era of grunge and the era of depression and the era of the end of history. But then he realized, it's kind of like with a .com boom, right? Oh my God, right? I could actually mold a world that could be better, right? And that was the emotional vector or whatever for the first Matrix movie. And then there's just something about Matrix 4 where it's 30 some odd years later and you have the Gen Xer, the cyber Jesus. And, you know, he's got a really nice condo and he has a really nice, I guess he owns that company or whatever. He has a really nice, you know, company and he has all the accolades and he has all the shit. And he's just kind of sitting there. He's now sitting there in a dark room, looking out at the world, just going, what the fuck happened? What happened? We were space Jesus. We were space Jesus. Anyways. And that's how we loop it back to the whole Picard. We loop it back to the whole Picard painting. Because we I guess it turns into Picard too. Remember when Picard was the man, and then they came out with the Picard TV show, and the Picard TV show it was just a sad, depressed old fuck. Yeah, I just feel like, again, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but like the mass media zeitgeist. In many ways, in the past couple of years, I just really feel mirrors the viewpoint of Gen X. Like, we saw this future, and then we got here, and now we're just in our weird little, very, very nice fish bowls. I guess supposedly what we're here to actually talk about today is from Reuters. OpenAI is unsatisfied with some Nvidia chips and looking for alternatives, sources say. So I think this is an interesting thing in the artificial intelligence world, because one of the things I've been arguing for a long time now is that the AI tech stack is fundamentally immature, right? When you look at a mature tech stack, so web applications are a mature tech stack. You know you need SSL, you need a web server, you need a backend programming language, you need record stores and data stores and a domain name and TCP/IP and all of that crap, right? The fact of the matter is everybody knows how to do it. It is basically cookie cutter at this point in time. You just follow the steps and you build whatever it is you're going to build. Maybe you can eke out like 1% increase in efficiency or something, resource utilization, but realistically, everybody's web application looks like, at least from an architecture standpoint, everybody else's web application, right? That's what we call a mature tech stack. One of the interesting things that I find is with the artificial intelligence world, they keep talking about it as if it is a mature tech stack. But the reality is, it is an incredibly immature tech stack. How we are building things today is fundamentally not how we're going to be building things 5 years from now. It's interesting. It's even things, relatively new things like MCP, Model Context Protocol. So what Model Context Protocol is supposed to be, gateway? Anyways, basically, more or less, like an API interface for artificial intelligence applications. So basically with MCP, you create this whole MCP server. So it's a client server architecture. So you create an MCP server. That MPC server has tools. It has tools and a few other things. So basically what happens is your AI agent communicates with the server and says, hey, what tools do you have available? The MCP server then sends back and says, these are the tools that I have available. Your AI agent then picks from those the appropriate tool for whatever task it wants to accomplish. And then it sends, that tool with whatever to the MCP server. The MCP server processes it, then sends back a response. And so basically the idea is, in an AI agentic world, the question is how do you come up with a standardized way for these agents to communicate with systems? So again, that you're not reinventing the wheel. Again, the valuable thing with having a mature tech stack is people not only know how to build it, but they also know how to maintain it and upgrade it and that kind of crap, right? So anyways, MCP came out 7-8 months ago, and that was supposed to be the future. Woo, MCP. We finally know how agentic AI is supposed to communicate. Everybody was excited. The interesting thing that I find nowadays, though, I've been talking with a lot of people that are actually doing work in the AI world, and they're actually like, nah, I'm not such a fan of MCP. I was like, what? Are you allowed? Are you allowed not to be a fan of MCP? Apparently, a lot of them were like, I just don't prefer MCP. And so apparently there's 5 other different standards out there. Which is just going to be fun, right? Again, think about this with web app development back in the day. Think about when you had ActiveX controls. Think about when you had Flash. Think about when you had SHTML. Think about There's like XHTML2. There was all kinds of different things. Like if you go back to the earlier days, like the 2000 era of web development, it was wild west of stupidity. Even tags, like they didn't standardize tags for a long time. So certain tags would work in certain web browsers in different ways. Like they would respond differently in different web browsers, and other tags just simply wouldn't work. Some tags worked for Netscape, some tags worked for Internet Explorer, some tags worked for Firefox. And so like even just basic, if all you wanted to do is have your neon titles blink, right? You had to make sure you did the tags appropriately for whatever fucking browser you thought your users were going to be using coming to the site. I mean, think about that. Think about a time period where you really had to consider the web browser somebody was going to be using when they're going to be interacting with your site. Again, ActiveX controls are a fucking disaster back in the day, but that's its own thing. So anyways, you think about that and you look at now where we are with artificial intelligence, and the interesting thing is like with agentic AI, right? This is supposed to be the future. MCP is supposed to be the way that agentic AI communicates. And what we're seeing now is after 6 or 7 months, however long it's been out, a lot of people are like, I'm not so much into the MCP world. And so they're going and they're using all of these other tools. And the important thing here is I do not know whether MCP will win at the end of the day. Again, sometimes legacy, sometimes first mover advantage actually works. Anyways, I don't know if MCP will win at the end of the day or lose at the end of the day. The important thing to understand is that this isn't standardized. Like this is not mature. They're still figuring out when they build their systems how the hell they want their systems to communicate with each other. And so that's a big thing when we start talking about these trillions of dollars of CapEx expenses, right? Sam Altman apparently assigned $1.3 billion in commitments for resources and all that kind of stuff. And again, one of the arguments that I've made with this kind of thing is we don't really even know fundamentally, not just the hardware, we don't know the architecture design for how these AI systems should appropriately be built going into the future, right? You have your design phase, you have your design and testing and all that kind of phase. And in that phase, man, you throw hardware at it, you throw money at it, you just fucking burn cash just to make something work. But then after you get it to work, then what you do is you start trying to constrain the resource consumption. You start trying to figure out like where the value proposition is there, right? Okay, so this feature set requires all of these resources. Here's a question. Is that feature set actually valuable? Maybe not, right? And you try to narrow down. And this is one of the things I talk about with the Granite 4 350 million parameter model, which I find really exciting, is because with Granite 4, what's really cool is you can do function calling. You can do a lot of the basic services that you expect out of an LLM, again, with RAG and all that kind of stuff, with a 350 million parameter model. So this thing can literally run on a Raspberry Pi. And so that's one of the things to consider. It's like, do I really need a model that has, 500 billion or a trillion parameters in the model itself in order to answer questions? Or do I need a really fucking small model, but connect an insane RAG database system to feed data from our knowledge base into the model, into the context window, so that we can get a better response? And I would argue, when you start looking at things like hallucinations, so hallucinations are not hallucinations. Hallucinations are errors. Basically what a hallucination is remember, with these LLMs, is they're trying to statistically basically put words in order. More or less, that's what they're trying to do. And so when you have a 500 billion parameter model, when you have a trillion parameter model, and you train this shit on Twitter and Reddit, right? It's gonna have a lot of weird fucking correlations. What? You mean things that learn off of Twitter are going to have weird correlations? Yes, right? So anyways, so that's one of the reasons you get hallucinations, is because you ask it a question, you put in a request, and it starts flipping things over and basically looking for statistical relationships. And the statistical relationship that it finds might be, in your eyes, batshit crazy, but it trained on Twitter. Right? So here's the thing. You have these huge models, right? That increases the possibility of things like hallucinations. Where if you have a teeny model, the model don't know shit about shit other than basically turning human words into tokens and that kind of thing, right? You give it a tiny model, you feed it from a RAG database system, and now you have it only answer questions based off of the data that comes out of the RAG, not off its own quote-unquote internal knowledge, and you can actually massively limit things such as hallucinations. And that's one of the big things to be thinking about right now is I really want you to understand that concept of we don't know how to build these we have no fucking clue how we're going to be building these architectures in 2030. And saying that we do is abjectly fucking stupid, which is why it makes me lose my goddamn mind to know that they're trying to put trillions of dollars into this horseshit. They do not know what they're building towards, right? And so with this too, again, with hardware, right? If you're running a 400 billion parameter model that requires, different hardware resources than running a 350 million parameter model. The other thing to be thinking about with hardware, right? Nvidia is supposed to be king because it's best for training. But one of the things I want you to understand is, right, in technology, everything has its cycle. Everything has its day, right? We are in, and we're actually, I would argue, we're probably getting to the end of the initial deployment for artificial intelligence when training is really important. Training costs a lot of money. Training takes a lot of time. Training requires a massive amount of resources. For most organizations, they're not going to be doing this forever, right? Training and retraining models is just a resource suck. They're going to want to do it a few times and then be done with it. And I would argue that's what we're looking at with the AI world is we've had this boom of training because we need models, right? You can't do inference without a fucking model to begin with, don't get me wrong, right? But we've had this boom of training, but now we're getting to the point we've got a lot of models. We've got a lot, and so many of the models are open source, and so many of the models are open weights, and so many of the models, you know where the hell the data came from. It didn't come from fucking Reddit or whatever the hell else. And so again, you go to Ollama. So Ollama is like an LLM model framework. You can install it onto your system. It's absolutely fabulous. You go there and you search for the models that already exist. I'm not even saying going to Hugging Face. Hugging Face is just a bazaar of models. You just go to Ollama, where they've actually curated it to some degree, and God knows there's hundreds and hundreds of models there at this point in time. And the thing to be thinking about is not just you in your home lab, but you as a CTO. Like if you're a CTO, if you're a CIO right now, and you're looking at wanting to deploy artificial intelligence into your environment, do you want to take the time, money, energy, and resources to train a model customized for your particular environment in 2026? Or do you want to use one of these hundreds of models that already exist that are going to do 99.999% of what you need? And then you can just build the RAG. You can just build the RAG to actually provide the knowledge to right? And I really want you to kind of consider that and think about, again, the value proposition of hardware, right? The claim to fame for Nvidia is that it's great for training. What happens when the value for training starts to drop and there starts to be more focus on inference? And the focus on inference is really interesting. The things that you need for inference are not the same hardware resources you need for training. And also, you can have chips that are designed for inference that use a fraction of the electricity that the NVIDIA chips use. And so again, when you start talking about spinning up 3 nuclear power plants just to fucking power a data center, you might, the whole idea of electricity consumption might start to become more and more important. And so that's why it's interesting to look at this now and see that OpenAI is unsatisfied with some NVIDIA chips and looking for alternatives. And this is where I talked about before. I've talked about with Google, with their TPUs, right? They have these tensor processing units. Apparently, they're called ASICs chips. They're chips that are designed to do only one task. Apparently, they use their TPUs to train Gemini 3 Pro. Those weren't NVIDIA processors. Meta is looking to purchase, I think, the TPUs. I think they're actually looking to purchase the TPUs rather than just like rent them or whatever else. Microsoft, they have their new AI chips that are coming down the pike. More and more companies are actually designing their own AI chips to do specifically what they need to do as the AI stack matures. And so that'll be the interesting thing to look at going forward. Again, I talked about that with first mover advantage, right? There's this idea of first mover. First mover wins. First mover almost never wins, right? BlackBerry didn't win, right? Remember before there were smartphones, there was this thing called BlackBerry, right? There was this idea that Steve Jobs invented smartphones. You know, BlackBerry has been around for a decade before the iPhone. But now nobody even remembers the damn BlackBerry. Why? Because they did not pivot into the future, right? Basically, this new product came out of left field that looked a lot like a fucking I mean, if you looked at the iPhone, again, remember iPhone, when iPhone came out, they were on AT&T. AT&T was a shit network back in the time. So you looked at the iPhone. The first iPhone was pretty crappy on a pretty crappy network. The big thing is it had iTunes. So if you're an iTunes fan, that was good. Otherwise, pretty crappy, right? BlackBerry shouldn't have had anything to worry about when the iPhone came out. But they did. They got killed by it, right? And again, that's kind of interesting. Like when you, like now it is manifestly obvious. Like, right, when you look at an iPhone 17 Pro Max and you look at a BlackBerry from 17 years ago, you're like, obviously this won. You're like, yeah, motherfucker. Look, the iPhone from 17 years ago is not this iPhone, right? And I think that's one of the things to look at. And I'm curious to see, as I say, where this will go in the future. So coming from Reuters, OpenAI is unsatisfied with some of Nvidia's latest artificial intelligence chips, and it has sought alternatives since last year, 8 sources familiar with the matter said. The ChatGPT maker's shift in strategy, the details of which are first reported here, is over an increasing emphasis on chips used to perform specific elements of AI inference, the process when an AI model, such as the one that powers ChatGPT, app responds to the customer's queries and requests. NVIDIA remains dominant in chips for training a large AI models, while inference has become a new front in the competition, right? And that's, yes, right? You get to a point when basically the models have been created, and then you simply have to go to the deployment phase. And in the deployment phase, it's all going to be around inference. On Saturday, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang brushed off a report of tension with OpenAI, saying the idea was nonsense. Oh, damn. Jensen Huang's fucked. You notice in the modern world, you notice in this Trump era world, like nobody ever just goes, no, that's wrong. Right? Wouldn't that be interesting if a CEO in the modern world, like, listened to something the reporter said and said, no, I'm not sure where you got that from, but yeah, no, we're fine. Like, what if a CEO just responded fucking normally? That would be lovely. One of the things I do want you to think about, and you've seen this more and more with Jensen Huang, which is curious to note, more of this nonsense. These very strong words, these strong words that are used for manipulation in order to try to make the person who asks the question feel stupid. Right? This is Ender's Game on a verbal front. If you haven't read Ender's Game, read Ender's Game. Don't watch the movie. But anyways, right? There's this whole thing in Ender's Game where he gets into a fight, and then the fight's basically over, and then he just the other kid is on the ground, and this kid Ender just fucking blasts the kid in the nutsack. Literally did not need to do it. The fight was already over. Ender had already won the whole 9 yards. And when he was asked why he blasted this guy in the ball sack after he'd won the fight, is because he said, it's not about winning this fight. It's about ending all fights. Right? By being so vicious, by being so nasty, after he had won to cause that much damage to the other kid, basically told all other kids, Not only do you not want to lose a fight to me, but if you lose a fight to me, it's going to go really, really bad, right? It's not about ending this fight. It's about ending all fights. And the interesting thing that you're noticing with the words that so many people are using now in the Trump era, right, is this idea. It's not about answering this question. It's about ending all questions. But the problem is, here's the thing about words. I know the blue hairs are all like, words are violence. No, they're fucking not. Anybody who's been beat almost half to death knows there's a difference between words and violence. Violence is violence, words is words. And here's the thing, right? When you try to use that mentality in the verbal world, at a certain point, it starts falling flat. At a certain point, it goes from seeming like you're strong to being like, oh shit, fuck, I didn't realize they were doing that bad. Did you see how Wong responded to that comment? Yeah, he was all bluster and anger and show. Fuck, he's scared. He's scared. All right. And it'll be a curious thing to watch. Again, with a lot of this stuff in the AI world, because it's a fraud, right? The AI is a fraud. It's not a bubble. It's a fucking fraud. Again, a lot of people are in on it. The government's in on it. The corporations are in on it. A lot of tech people are in on it. Like, it's a consensual fraud. Consensual fraud. It's not fraud if it's consensual. Well, anyways. But you notice this, right? Like Sam Altman, right? When Sam Altman was asked about his revenue a couple of months ago, he was done with it. I am done with those kinds of questions. You're like, what the fuck does that mean, bitch? Oh, you realize you have no viable argument that makes sense, and so you're just done with it? Anyways. And that Nvidia planned a huge investment in OpenAI. So this goes back to this whole idea where Nvidia was going to invest, or we were told Nvidia was going to invest $100 billion into OpenAI in September. That still has not been closed, and they're walking it back. It's not gone from $100 billion to $200 billion, which is what you would expect if AI was as amazing as they say it is. It's gone from $100 billion to maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe nothing. It would also be interesting, too, if Nvidia was walking back their planned investment because OpenAI realizes Nvidia's hardware is not the path forward. Again, like, think about this from a practical standpoint. Don't listen to what CEOs and decision makers say. Look at what they do. It would be interesting, again, when you look at this, is if Nvidia was going to invest $100 billion in OpenAI, and then OpenAI buys $100 billion in Nvidia, right? This whole circular financing horse crap. Well, here's the thing. If Nvidia gets equity in OpenAI for that transaction, there could be a real problem if Sam Altman doesn't actually believe Nvidia is the hardware vendor to use going forward. Right? If Nvidia hardware is what they are going to buy anyway, then it might make sense to hand over that equity so they can buy more Nvidia hardware. Here's a question. What if Jensen Huang finds out that OpenAI wants that $100 billion, but it's not all going to go back to Nvidia? Maybe a huge chunk is going to go to one of these inference competitors. That would be a real reason to want to yank back $100 billion of investment. That Nvidia doesn't essentially want to fund their own competitors, which again is the interesting thing of what is the real value of OpenAI. Does Nvidia want to invest in OpenAI because OpenAI is actually going to be valuable, or is Nvidia simply investing in OpenAI for that circular financing thing? Quote, customers continue to choose NVIDIA for inference because we deliver the best for performance and total cost of ownership at scale, NVIDIA said in a statement. And again, the interesting question here is things at like what scale, for what is it that you are particularly doing? A spokesperson for OpenAI in a separate statement said the company relies on NVIDIA to power the vast majority of its inference fleet and that NVIDIA delivers the best performance per dollar for inference. Again, it may also be true, but questionably true. Again, company relies on NVIDIA to power the vast majority of its inference fleet, which is probably true, right? Again, NVIDIA has been the front runner in the GPU in this whole AI space for 10 years now. So the thought that OpenAI's current architecture is designed around NVIDIA makes complete sense. That's not saying about tomorrow, though. Again, past resource utilization does not correspond to future resource utilization. After the Reuters story was published, OpenAI chief executive Sam Altman wrote in a post on X that NVIDIA makes, quote, the best AI chips in the world, and that OpenAI hoped to remain, quote, a gigantic customer for a very long time. Again, those words can be true and also fucking irrelevant. right? NVIDIA's GPUs, you can use them for training, you can use them for inference, you can use them on almost any different operating system out there. It has the most compatibility with hardware, right? All of that stuff that Jensen Huang said before. But that's not necessarily relevant for specific tasks. I don't need the best hardware to do a particular job. I need the appropriate hardware to do the particular job, right? I don't need a Maserati to drive to work in the morning. I can drive to work in a Ford, right? Again, you can say a Maserati is one of the best cars that have ever been built. Compared to a Maserati, a Ford is a toy. It's like, well, yeah, but my toy cost 40 grand and it's really comfortable and it has CarPlay. See, my toy is functional, where the best in the world actually would probably be a detriment. I'd have to pay more for insurance for the best in the world. It would get worse gas mileage for the best in the world. I'd have to worry about vandalism and theft and everything else. You drive around a fucking Maserati, everybody does see you. You drive around a Ford, nobody gives a fuck. Right? What is the appropriate resource to be able to solve your problem? Not necessarily the quote-unquote best one. And that they're going to be a gigantic customer for a very long time. Look, Sam Altman has done $1.3 trillion in commitments. Man, they're going to be a gigantic... Sam Altman's going to be a gigantic customer for everybody for a very long time. 7 sources said that OpenAI is not satisfied with the speed at which NVIDIA's hardware can spit out answers to ChatGPT users for specific types of problems, such as software development and AI communicating with other software. It needs new hardware that would eventually provide about 10% of OpenAI's inference computing needs in the future, one of the resources said. So again, this is the other interesting thing to be thinking about too. With these different models out there and these different ways of basically answering problems are the NVIDIA GPUs designed specifically to be able to do those particular tasks? Would it be more appropriate to have more task engineered chips? The ChatGPT maker has discussed working with startups, including Cerebras and Grok, to provide chips for faster inference. And curious to know, Grok was not purchased by NVIDIA. Grok was gutted by NVIDIA, right? So NVIDIA was really worried about trust issues, monopoly issues in the United States. So they did this whole thing about basically they bought the intellectual property, they licensed the intellectual property, they hired the executives, and they left the shell of Grok behind. NVIDIA's GPUs are well suited for massive data crunching necessary to train large AI models like ChatGPT that have underpinned the explosive growth of AI globally to date. But AI advancements increasingly focus on using trained models for inference and reasoning, which could be a new, bigger stage of AI, inspiring OpenAI's efforts. Yes. Inference is always going to have higher load, higher demand than the training. You do the training once or twice or whatever else, most of the utilization for AI should come from inference. The ChatGPT makers search for GPU alternatives since last year. That's the other interesting thing. Last year, so 2025, focused on companies building chips with large amounts of memory embedded in the same piece of silicon as the rest of the chip, called SRAM. Squishing as much SRAM as possible onto each chip can offer speed advantages for chatbots and other AI systems as they crunch requests for millions of users. And this is where I've talked about before, about the actual chip architecture. So one of the reasons that Apple computers, these MacBooks, work so well compared to a lot of other computers is basically everything is on the same chip. So you got the RAM and the processors and the GPU and all of that on one chip. So you have this bus, right? So the bus is basically the communication structure, interface for all of these different components to be able to communicate with each other, right? So the thing is, like with a lot of computers, right, you have the CPU that's plugged into the motherboard, and you have the RAM that's plugged in the motherboard, you have all the stuff that's plugged in the motherboard, and then they have all these interfaces that go to the motherboard, and the underlying bus allows stuff to be able to communicate. And the issue that you run into many times is the bottleneck is the bus. The bottleneck isn't your processor or your storage or your RAM. Many times it's actually the bus. You'll see a speed of the front side bus back when I used to assemble computers, you saw it a lot, like the 1333 megahertz or whatever, right? It would give you a speed of that front side bus. So basically, when you were looking for motherboards, depending on what you're trying to build for, you would find a motherboard with a faster front side bus, because that bus is what allows everything to communicate better. So again, one of the interesting things to be thinking about with this is what they're arguing here is that other people designing chips, they want to put that RAM, they want to put that memory as close to the processor as possible, and so even put it on the exact same chip as the processor will actually give better performance for things like inference. And this is where I've argued before about my concern with the US and China, right? This whole argument that China, that the United States is ahead and will always be ahead and China is behind because they can't use our systems. One of the big questions out there is, what if they start architecting things in different ways, right? NVIDIA has come up with an architecture style that works, that is scalable, that is replicatable, that they can build upon, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it. It means they invested a shit ton of money, they figured out how to do that way, and now they're just milking that cow for all it's worth. But one of the problems you run into is, just because you figured out how to do something one way and it works, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. If somebody else comes into the game and they can't buy your hardware, and they can't buy your technology, and they can't necessarily build on what you've done, and they go back to the drawing board. They say, we know that we can solve this problem. We know there's a way to do this. We can't use the way that the other people are doing it. What if we rethought, right? You know, with NVIDIA is building on their legacy, right? NVIDIA's been around since the 1990s. They're building on their legacy architecture one way or another, right? Once something becomes legacy, it never fucking goes away. Here's the thing. What if somebody started with a clean whiteboard on 2026? They might be behind. They might be behind now, but by 2030 or 2035, right, their legacy is now going to be 20 or 30 years younger than your legacy. So anyways, it's one of those things to be thinking about. So what they're talking about here is just putting the RAM on the same die as the CPU, gives apparently better performance for inference. Inference requires more memory than training because the chip needs to spend relatively more time fetching data from memory than performing mathematical operations. Nvidia and AMD GPU technologies rely on external memory. Inside OpenAI, the issue became particularly visible in Codex, its product for creating computer code, which the company has been aggressively marketing. One of the sources added, OpenAI staff attributed some of Codex's weakness to NVIDIA's GPU-based hardware. That literally the product that they're trying to build, the product that they're trying to deploy, is being held back because of NVIDIA's best in the world GPUs. Competing products such as Anthropic's Claude and Google's Gemini benefit from deployments that rely more heavily on the chips Google's made in-house called TPUs, which are designed for the sort of calculations required for inference and can offer performance advantages over general purpose AI chips like the NVIDIA designed GPUs. So anyways, there you go. There are some things to ponder. There may already be fractures between OpenAI and Nvidia that are forming, right? As OpenAI tries to push their product into the future, and they realize there's limitations on what Nvidia can do, and then what happens next? Because, right, NVIDIA is in an incredibly fragile position, right? Remember this with investment. Investment is all about optics. It's not about your factories. It's not about your employees. It's not about so many things you really want it to be about. It's about optics. What do investors believe, right? That was the fascinating thing that I found out about startup companies. So many years ago, back in that 2012, 2013 timeframe, when I was really around the startup world, and I was trying to understand. Oh man, don't put an ASPE into the startup world. Logic need not apply. Anyways, and that was the amazing thing. And I was sitting there and I was talking to all of these investors, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, why is the valuation for this startup $5 million and the valuation for this startup $30 million? How can something that somebody crapped out during a hackathon over a weekend literally have a $2 million valuation a week later? And that's the kind of crap that you really did see. And the interesting thing is where they were like, it's a feeling. Like you as an investor intrinsically feel what you think the value of that should be. Right? So if you're coming up with a new database system, a new CRM solution, people might feel that has a valuation of $2 million. Where if you're coming up with an AI dating site, dog dating site, they feel like that has a valuation of $100 million. That's what it is, boys and girls. That's what it is, right? I was talking with an old white guy, many years ago, back during some painful days for some folks. Anyways, and I was trying to figure out the real value of something, right? Stocks and bonds and all that. I was saying there's an old white guy. I'm like, I don't understand. So how do you figure out the value of this thing, right? Do you compare it to like a basket of stocks or currencies? Like do you see the basket of like won and euros and US dollars, and based off the value of that basket, when you look at the value of this stock or commodity, is that how you determine the value of the thing? And it was funny because we're going back and forth. It's like Eli. It's like, here's the thing: you only ever know the value of something at the moment of the transaction. At the moment somebody provides you the good or service, or basically provides you the stock, the equity, and you hand over the cash, that's when you know the value, right? And that's why when you look at the stock market, a volume of transactions is so important for a particular stock. Because the larger the volume is how often the stock is traded, you get a better idea of how the market feels about the value of that stock. So if you have a stock, let's say if you have a stock, but people only buy or sell it once per week, right? You have one data point per week. Well, last week, this is how much somebody was willing to buy it for, but you really don't know this week if the same is true. Right? The thing is with volume of stock, right? Basically, if people are buying and selling thousands of times per day, millions of times per day in a particular stock, you get a nice little curve throughout the day. You literally get a second by second view of how the market feels about the value of that particular equity. That's what it comes down to, boys and girls. Welcome to our economy. Welcome to our economy. Anyways, so the interesting thing you look at is with Nvidia, right? Nvidia is like $5 trillion. Like a $5 trillion, somewhere around a $5 trillion company right now. The most valuable company to ever exist. The problem is all of their value is based off of this AI play. It's AI play or nothing. And remember, when investors invest, when they buy that stock, they're not buying that stock to maintain that value. They're not buying that stock to get a 10% return or something like that. They're buying that stock because they want it to go from $5 trillion to $10 trillion, from $10 trillion to $20 trillion, right? That type of deal. And so the issue that you run into for a company like Nvidia, right, is what happens when the stack starts maturing, when companies stop burning money in order to get to a particular outcome. They start having to focus on the actual resource utilization and total cost of ownership and all that kind of stuff. And what happens when they just start looking for a different route? Even if your GPU is the best, even if a McLaren is the best car, it's not appropriate for what we're trying to do. It is not appropriate for me to drive to work every day. Right? Even if a 1 trillion parameter model is the best model, and to run that model, you need 5 $40,000 GPUs, is that appropriate for function calling? Is that appropriate for most of the RAG systems out there? And then here's the thing. Like, so NVIDIA is selling all these $40,000 GPUs, and those start having questionable relevance going into the future. But then you say, well, but Eli, they're a $5 trillion company. They can just invent. They can invent. Again, they can buy Grok. They can gut the fuck out of Grok. Anyways, they can gut Grok. They can do these other things. But here's the thing. Are people going to be willing to spend the price premium for an inference chip versus a GPU? Right? That's the whole thing. Like luxury goods have a higher profit margin than commodity goods. right? Again, a Ford has a smaller profit margin than a McLaren does, right? Because people that are willing to throw money on the table, aren't as cost conscious. So even if Nvidia starts selling the inference chips, the profit for those inference chips is most likely going to be significantly less than what they're making for their flagship Blackwell or whatever the hell they're called at this point in time. And so again, it's interesting. It puts Nvidia into a weird space. One, the AI fraud has to continue, right? The moment the AI fraud has a fucking hiccup, then Nvidia has problems because, do all of these companies need all this hardware if this shit's a fraud, if people know it's a fraud? And then you start looking at it, if they start getting competitors, so the competitors come in, that starts taking their market share, that could be incredibly damaging to them. And then even if they pivot and they start doing these lower value, these inference processors, their profit margins for those inference processors are going to be significantly less than what they're getting for their state-of-the-art GPUs, which basically brings up an interesting question of, again, what is the future of Nvidia? And it's also probably why you're going to start hearing more and more of these these strident responses to journalists asking pretty fucking softball questions about the business model in the AI world when it comes to Nvidia and the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, we'll see. Like that's the thing you have to understand. A lot of people out there ask me, like, Eli, why do you hate AI? And I don't hate AI. I genuinely don't hate AI. I love Granite. Granite's fucking awesome. 11 Labs. Have you played with 11 Labs? I love fucking 11 Labs. 11 Labs, $11 billion. $11 billion. It's a nice number. It's $11 billion company. Anyways, 11 Labs. They have their AI voice agents. Fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. It fucking hyperscales auto attendants. It's like imagine an auto attendant. That was good. Anyways, right? Look, I love AI. Again, a lot of it, but how they are going about this, none of this makes sense. Again, with normal business, even with startup businesses, there is supposed to be more common sense to it. Again, with the whole idea of scaling. Right? The idea, the concept is this is our product or service. This is how much it costs to create a product or service. This is the customers that we currently have. This is our profit margin or our loss on providing our product or service to these particular customers. Right? We believe if we can get 100x, 1,000x, 1,000,000x more customers. Basically, we believe once we get more, the percentage of those people that are willing to pay for premium services will go up, so our profit margin will go up. And as we get more and more users, the cost, the per unit cost providing services or products is going to go down because of scale. Ergo, $1 million should get us to a particular point. $100 million should get us to a particular point. $1 billion should theoretically get us to a particular point. And even if the math isn't there, because again, there is so much touchy-feely, fucking metaphysical horse shit when it comes to the investor world, that's still the feeling. Like, look at our product. Look at how much people love our product. Imagine if we had the marketing spend to get our product in front of 8 billion people. The issue that we get to with the AI world is this is fantasy horse shit. Again, OpenAI at this point in time, the CFO comes out and says this is the year of productivity. Because after 3 years or however long ChatGPT is out in the world, the fact of the matter is most people don't know how to use the product to actually do valuable things. Think about this. $1.3 trillion in commitments, and most people don't know what the value proposition of the damn thing is. Right? And we see now with XAI, right? XAI bought Twitter to save the Twitter investors. Think about this. It is very interesting that XAI just got bought by SpaceX. Why? Right? If OpenAI can theoretically have its own $1 trillion IPO and the rest of it, wouldn't it make sense if this wasn't a fraud, to keep XAI its own company and SpaceX its own company so that they're separated. But for some reason, we now have SpaceX, a successful, societally valuable company, now buying XAI. Could it be that the math doesn't math? And they realize it. And that's my frustration. All this. It's not the technology. LLMs are fine. I'm not racist against LLMs. I have LLM friends. I'm just saying this is not. It's not a good way to live. It's not a good way to live. This is not a good path forward. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways. What do you think about this with OpenAI being unsatisfied with at least some of Nvidia chips? What do you think about this for the Nvidia play? How does Nvidia get from $5 trillion to $10 trillion? What is the path to $10 trillion for Nvidia? Do you honestly believe they're going to continue on this growth path for another 5 years? And where does it become stable? It's not just that you go from $5 trillion to $10 trillion, but hopefully, if this isn't all just a fucking gambling game, if they get to $10 trillion, that should be stable, right? There's going to be little boom and bust cycles and that kind of thing. But you should get to that level and basically be able to plateau, to be able to stay there. And that's what I don't see. It just seems like Nvidia is a boom play. And at the end of it, where are you at? But anyways, those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts on Nvidia and OpenAI and art? Do you like retro robots with donuts? What do retro robots with donuts mean to you? That's the question. Oh, lordy. Anyways, I've got to get back to work. Finish the class for Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be a cool class. I'm also going to be at the All Things Open meetup on Tuesday. So I will be going to Durham a little bit early. So I'll go to that. Again, don't listen to what people say. Look at what they do. As I said, Research Triangle is phenomenal. I drive 3.5 hours to the Research Triangle and am willing to spend nights in hotels to do things there. It's not what I say, it's what I do. It's the money I put on the table. So anyway, it's a good area. And if you can go to the All Things Open meetups, just a great fucking group of people. Absolutely terrific group of people. And anywho, what is it? I do remember I do these videos in order to support Silicon Dojo. Authorityless, gatekeeperless, free end user, hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. Maybe coming back to Asheville. Who knows? Supposedly. Look, I've had very good conversations. Anyways, maybe we're coming back to Asheville. But we are having a class on AI telephony agents with Twilio and 11 Labs. Gonna be fucking awesome. That'll be next Wednesday. We are having the full day class on Bottle and SQL for building AI web applications. That'll be coming up, this month on a Saturday. And we're gonna have the TCP/IP version 4 for programmers. That'll be coming up. That'll be a Wednesday night course. So if you're interested in those and you can attend in person, go to silicondojo.com to see what our current schedule is. If you want to help support Silicon Dojo, there is a donor box link down below. And with that, see y'all later.